It's so nice to be with Dana because everybody claps and everybody smiles.
We were here a year and a half ago, the two of us.
That's right. Do you think the room is a little bit bigger?
I think that the last year, election years are like dog years. So I'm really like 7 years older than a year and a half ago.
Yeah, I'm very glad this election is over. First of all, if you do not have your book, you need to go buy this book. It is the perfect gift. I'm just going to say that. I love it so much. Reading through it, Dana, I had so many memories of being with Jasper. But I want to start off, and we'll get to some of the great stories about Jasper, but I want to start off about right before Jasper. Tell us about losing a dog, and that I can't even imagine, for one. I say I don't trust anyone who doesn't own a dog. But tell us that process of losing a dog and what you go through to think about replacing, I can't even say that word, but thinking about the next dog.
Well, one of the reasons that I love this book is that I do think that dogs are a great equalizer. They soften people's hearts. Anybody see that pedigree ad that was at the end of the election? And they send a woman with a lost dog in a Trump t-shirt to a Hillary rally, and everyone's so nice to her. And then vice versa, and everyone's so nice to her. And everyone tries to help out the dog. And I really have found that, especially, I grew up in Wyoming on a cattle ranch with dogs, and then now I live in Manhattan, which is a little different. And I have some rules in the book about the dog park, rules for people and rules for dogs. Dogs are not allowed to sit down at the dog park, and people are not allowed to talk politics at the dog park. And of course, part of the reason that people have this common connection over their dogs, it's not just the joy that they bring you when they're alive, it's that shared grief of saying goodbye to a pet. And we have dominion over animals, and so over the centuries or in millennia that we have come to this point where now dogs are sleeping in our bed if you allow them. Rick knows because Rick has Lola, and Jasper and Lola are good friends. So when I wrote the book, the first book, and the good news is, there was a chapter in that book about all the dogs in my life, and it was one of my favorite chapters. Of course, I had the chapter about George W. Bush and that administration. I had the chapter of meeting Peter on an airplane and all the mentoring advice. I had this chapter on all the dogs, and I loved it. And I thought, people are going to love this because that's what connects me with so many people. So I'm not a natural long-form writer. And when I wrote that first book, I turned it in June 1st. And the editor writes back, remember when your teacher would write more on the bottom of your paper? It was like every page, more. And what he was saying is, don't be so shy. Tell us more about what it's really like, and let us hear some of these stories as you tell them in person. Let's see that on the Word. So I work all summer, and I'm a very good student. And I turn in the final draft, and he calls me like 2 days later, and he says, I'm sorry, but now it's too long. And I had to cut 10,000 words. And that's like an entire chapter. So I fiddle with it, and I thought that the writing was really tight. I couldn't bear to cut any of those stories of George Bush or my time at the ranch or having a chance to live in England. And then I look at the dog chapter, and it's 9,500 words. So I went to the editor, and I said, as much as it breaks my heart to do this, I'm giving it back to you. And he said, you're making the right decision, and I promise you that one day there will be a dog book. So that's how we end up here. But one of the stories that people knew about me from the White House years until later was one that I had to write more about. And I grew up with dogs, but the first dog I had as an adult was named Henry. He was also a Vizsla. And people that knew me as the White House press secretary or even before knew about Henry because even then I talked about my dog all the time. Before there was social media, I talked about my dog all the time. The president used to ask me, how's Henry today? Dick Cheney would always want to know about Henry's tricks. So I got Henry when I was 26 years old. I had just gotten married in England, and then we moved to San Diego. We come back here, and he was about 1 year old in 1998, and that was the Lewinsky scandal years. And I was living in England. I couldn't work because I didn't have a visa, and so I basically was a dog mom, and I had all this time on my hands. And I wanted my dog to be able to do lots of tricks, because my grandfather, growing up on the ranch, I dedicate this book to him because he really taught me about dignity and patriotism, but mostly about the love for animals and how our care for them is so important. And he could tell our ranch dogs could do anything. He could go outside with one whistle or one point. These dogs would know, oh, now we have to go up and over the hill, get the cattle, bring them back, put them in the corral, shut the gate, and then we'll come back and we'll have dinner.
We should say his name, Leo Perino.
Leo Perino was my grandfather and also my father. So Henry, I would teach all these tricks to. He was brilliant. Jasper can't do a single trick. But Henry could do tons of tricks. So I taught him to bark on the word jail. And then I would ask him, Henry, do you think Bill Clinton should be in jail? And he would bark. And people would be amazed and thought it was so funny. Later on, when we moved into our apartment building in New York, it was right after Michael Vick had been convicted for his crimes against dogs. And so I changed it, because the word that he barked on was jail. So you could put anybody's name in there. I could say, do you think Michael Vick should be in jail? And he would bark, and the doorman thought that was hilarious. So we had party tricks. And then in 2004, 43 loved this trick that he could do. I taught Henry, show me what you really think about John Kerry. And he would go get my flip-flop and bring it back. And then, towards the end of his life, Henry was then 11 when Obamacare passed. And, an 11-year-old dog, can you really teach him something new? I taught him to play dead when I asked him about Obamacare. So he was a psychic as well. But when I went to write about him and his passing, and I call it One Last Swim, because he loved to go to the beach and swimming, and so I knew he wasn't well, and we had just moved to New York, so I look online and I find a dog beach that would allow dogs, and we get there and it's windy, but he has this little pep in his step, but it was that something inside goes wrong, and we had to put him down the next day. Actually, we didn't. Let me back up. We did take him to the vet that night. Peter did. Got a taxi that would stop, that would allow him to get in. Henry was a big dog, about 70 pounds. And Peter knew where he needed to go, so the vet drops him off at the Blue Pearl Clinic. The next morning, we thought we were going to go pick him up and bring him back. And they called, and they said, you need to get here right away. So we were just so much grief. And many of you in the room have been through it, maybe once, twice, or multiple times. Charles Krauthammer writes in his book, why do we do this to ourselves? But it's because of the love that they give us. So we arrive, and I'm remembering what my grandfather had taught us, that you never let an animal suffer. And Peter, my husband, was just collapsing inside. So we were saying goodbye to him. He was on the floor and on oxygen. And then I stood up and I said, okay, we're ready. And so I led Peter to the back room where then the vet would come in. And they'd close the door behind us, and so we're waiting. And the door opens, and the vet comes in, and he said, he died as soon as you walked away. So we actually did not have to put him down. He died. And that night, around 10 p.m., our phone rings. And if your phone rings late at night, that's never good. But it was Greta Van Susteren, and she said, I know that you're heartbroken, but I'm going to tell you the best thing that you can do is get another dog right away. And I said, well, there's 101 reasons why we can't, because we now live in New York, and there's not a blade of grass anywhere. You've tried dogs in New York. You can do it, and it can be wonderful, but it is effort. And potty training a puppy, 46 floors up, there's a hilarious chapter about that in this book, too. So it's a long way of saying that, yes, losing Henry was something that I shared with our viewers on The Five. And part of the interesting thing about doing The Five, and we're on our 6th year, is that people, yeah. is that it's a show where it's about us and what we think and what we did last night and the crazy thing Gutfeld watched the night before and Kimberly's son and like the things that Juan went to the baseball game and Eric was with his wife out to dinner and it's all this personal stuff so you get to know us very well. And I said goodbye to Henry. I got a lot of outpouring of support and 2 months later Jasper comes on the scene. And not long after that Gutfeld leads me to basically nickname him America's dog, not because I think he's the best dog in America. Everyone thinks their dog is the best dog, and they're right. It's because I said I would share him with everybody, and I'd do all the cleanup.
Well, I wanted to tell that story because I know your heart, and I know how important dogs are to so many people, and the way that we treat dogs like children, and I know you very well.
I've been accused.
And you treat Jasper and you treated Henry like a child. So I love the emotion of that story because I think it's real, and I also have never gone through it, and it makes me very nervous when I think about it. But
well, even it is one of those things that I think another thing that we all share if you love a dog and a cat too. I don't mean to exclude the cats, but as soon as you get that puppy, especially if you've been through it before, the first thing you start doing is counting. Like, well, now they're 7. Oh, they're 1, but they're really 7. But then now they're 14, and now Jasper is 4, and I start to have this panic, and he's got little beginnings of little white whiskers under his chin, and I'm like, and I started crying, and I said, Peter, he's got white whiskers on his chin. He's like, he's only 4. He's going to be fine. But the thing is, like, that you have a limited time with them.
Expand a little bit and tell us how you did potty train Jasper.
Well,
because I've been to your place.
Well, yeah, and actually it was in a different place. We were in Hell's Kitchen because it was a new building, but it was 46 floors up, and the elevator was 36 yards from the apartment door. Then you had to get in the elevator, and then you had to stop about 5 or 6 times on the way down. Then you had to get out of the building, through, and then they didn't want you to just have outside the door, so you got to get them far enough away. And this is a lot to ask of a 9-week-old puppy. So we end up, we try all sorts of things. Someone told us on the hallway, as you're trying to get down to the elevator, if you have him sit down, he won't pee. That's not true. He would sit down. He was very good. He would learn to sit, and then there would go like this. That carpet was so bad by the time we moved out of there. We offered to replace it. And they loved us and they loved Jasper so much, the building manager said, there's a lot of dogs that live up there. So we didn't have to do that. So actually what we ended up doing is until he was old enough and big enough to hold his pee, Peter carried him. And when Peter wasn't home, I would try to carry him. Then I did fine for a while. I remember when he was about 45 pounds. And I was like a sack of potatoes. And somebody said, can't he walk on his own? I was like, yes, but what if he pees and I'd have to get to the office? And there's also lots of stories in there about separation anxiety, which was really not the dog's separation anxiety, it was mine. To the point that I write a whole chapter about the separation anxiety and how I did something wrong. I turned back one day when he was crying because I had to go to the Huckabee show. This is when Mike Huckabee, when he had his weekend show, I had to be at the studio, and I had hired this young woman to come take care, but the traffic was bad, and so I put Jasper in his little crate that he liked being in when we were in the apartment. I had just never shut the door of it. So I shut the door, and I'm pretending like it's no big deal, and I didn't even say goodbye because I thought I don't want him to think that I'm leaving. And I start towards the elevator, and I hear a sound worse than anything heard at Gitmo. And I thought I should leave him. But I'm in a high-rise, and I have neighbors, and I don't know if the woman's coming, and I turned around. And I went in, and I got him. And that was it. I ruined it. And then I would have so much anxiety about leaving him that if Peter and I were going out to dinner, I would negotiate, and I'd say, can I go down first? so that I would go and wait in the lobby for Peter to have to be the one to say goodbye to him. So it wouldn't be me. It's ridiculous, but true.
And I will say, as in knowing Peter, he always takes the hits.
Yes, and in fact, there was one time when somebody had asked us if how Jasper's separation anxiety was. It was at a dinner, and I saw Peter pointing at me like this, and so I was like, "Oh, you know what I'm doing when I say we can't go out with people because of the dog?" He's like, "Yeah, I know what you're doing."
One thing I want to know, there are a lot of pictures in here, and I know a
Yeah.
lot of them are from the fan, but Jasper does wear goggles. Jasper does wear things. He
Yeah.
has been able to put hats on and booties on and goggles. How did you get him to do that? Because he seems very comfortable in the sidecar.
Yeah, so a lot of women in here will know what it's like when your husband comes to you and he wants to have that talk about getting a motorcycle. And I said, well, when are you going to ride it? Where are you going to ride it? And he had it all planned out. I said, well, how are you going to leave? We have very limited time together on the weekends. What are you going to do with Jasper? And he says, oh, it's all set. My husband had found on eBay a Harley police cruiser that had a sidecar. And I said, okay, but how are you going to strap him in there? He's like, got it all figured out. Had this special designed like little dog harness thing. And then somebody sent him doggles. And sure enough, Jasper lets him put them on, and he knows that he gets to ride if he wears the goggles. If he doesn't have the goggles, then he doesn't get to go. So he's smart. He can't do tricks, but he's figured this stuff out. So yes, he rides around. They don't go too far, but people love it. And you know, it's changed. Nobody knows me anymore. And that's fine. They know him. When they're driving down to Bluffton in South Carolina, you'll see people honk, "Hey, it's America's dog. Go Jasper." At Central Park not long ago, this guy is jogging along and he hears me call after Jasper, and he says, oh, "Is that the Jasper from Fox News?" And I said, "Yeah." And then he recognized me and he said, "Could I get a picture?" I said, "Oh, sure, Peter will take it." And I go to get in the picture, and with a subtle gesture, it was clear he didn't want me in the picture. He just wanted it with Jasper.
We should stop right here for a second and explain that Jasper is in New York City a lot, but in certain times of year, Dana has a house in South Carolina, and Jasper gets to go to the house in South Carolina with Peter. They drive, right?
Yes.
And the house is, besides being gorgeous, it is a dog's paradise.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit about the difference between Jasper, New York City.
Oh.
You have to be in Central Park by a certain time to be off leash, and then the difference between being in South Carolina.
So Rick is making it sound like I'm the crazy dog person. But twice now, Rick has brought Lola on a plane to visit with us for a long weekend in South Carolina, and we've enjoyed having them so much. So he's crazy.
The top of the plane, not in the bottom.
Yes, because Lola is special that way, and so are they. I wanted I actually was kind of fussy as an adult about my house being clean, and then I had to just let that go, because Jasper is going to sit on the chair. He was born thinking this is totally normal. Like if he were here, he would figure out a way to sit right up here with me. He will squeeze into any space. I wrote my book like this because he'd have to have his head here, and I would use the computer like that. So we love South Carolina. I went there for a wedding in 2001, and I thought, wow, what is this place? And at least from the East Coast perspective, for me, it was one of the prettiest places I've seen in the Low Country. So I say that Jasper's a city dog and a country dog. And he is pretty seamless between the two, except for last winter, we got a chance to go duck hunting. No. Oh, I don't know what kind of birds they were. I'm not much of a hunter, but there was some sort of bird hunting thing we were invited to. And they said, bring Jasper along, he'll love it. So sure enough, Jasper's having a great time, and he's trusting his instincts, and he's running along, and he's flushing the birds up. The first gunshot, he turned around and came right back to me. So he's a little bit of a baby and a city dog, but we do love having a chance to go there where the dogs can stretch their legs. And I shamelessly accept every invitation from our friends to go visit them in the New York City area. We have a friend in Long Island. They also have a place in Rhode Island. I know I've got somebody at the beach in New Jersey, and in the Roxbury, Connecticut, of course, you can go see Nicole Wallace, who is a friend of ours that worked in the Bush administration, and she has Vizsla, so we go see her. Then I've got somebody up in the Berkshires in Massachusetts, and so we just sort of rotate all around and get out on the weekends and take Jasper along.
Now, you only have one dog, but Jasper, when in South Carolina, has a best friend, Grady. Mm-hmm. And tell us a little bit about what it's like for a dog like Jasper to have a best friend buddy that he's always around, and how is that dynamic?
Well, it's funny. I mean, a lot of people that have dogs end up having two because you want them to have a companion, and I cannot do that in New York. Have you ever seen these people in New York? They've got two leashes and an umbrella and a bag, and they're trying to figure out how to walk down the street, and it would be too cumbersome for us. So I would love to have more than one dog. I'd love to rescue a dog, but that's not what we have. But in South Carolina, his buddy, Grady, and now Grady now has a buddy that lives with him now. His name is Bentley, after Dierks Bentley, of course. Because I took Macy to go to the concert, and now she's in love with Dierks Bentley. It's just fun to watch them have a great time. Now, and I fully separate dogs and children, and I really respect my friends who are juggling with all of the responsibilities there are to raising an actual human who will become a productive citizen of the United States of America. But I love also to watch that interplay. And what I found, too, is that in a life that my life is pretty public-facing all the time, one of my favorite places in New York is actually the dog park. So Central Park is leash-free from 6 to 9 a.m. every day. And when I go there...
But at 9 a.m., you got to put the dog on the leash.
Yeah. Well, you can maybe push it to 9:15. In D.C., they'll give you a ticket. And you could get arrested later on. There's a story about that in the book. I didn't get arrested, but Peter did. But you know what those moments in your life that you're searching for that are kind of hard when everybody's so busy, but I guess we would call it serenity or a Zen moment, but serenity, I guess, would probably be the best way to describe it. And for me, that's when you're not really worried about yesterday or tomorrow. You're just there. And the times I found that, looking back, to write more for the editor, that's actually where I find that kind of peace. And I get a kick out of the dogs. I love it that I know all of the dogs' names and some of the parents' names, not all of them. But we've become friends with a lot of the people there. We see each other every day, no makeup, like dirty clothes. Peter is the Pied Piper of treats, and we've found ways to connect with humans because of our dogs. And I don't think that we're the only ones. I think that is certainly across the country and maybe around the world.
I know you talk about dogs being a great stabilizer, and especially emotionally. What do you say to people who don't own dogs and who don't understand what they give, and they look at dogs as, wow, that sounds like a lot of work?
A lot of work. Well, first of all, if you're a single person and you want to go to the dog park with a dog, you can take Jasper. You'll never know who you might meet. One of the things that this book will do is go to support, part of the proceeds will go to support a group I've been supportive of for 8 years now, and it's called Companions for Heroes. So you can see that obviously I love my dog and it does a lot for me. I've talked about the people at the dog park. Companions for Heroes was started by a veteran, a wounded warrior, who came back from some pretty tough assignments in 2001 after 9/11. And he had post-traumatic stress. His name is Dave Sharp. And that post-traumatic stress comes in a lot of different ways. One of the symptoms can be some volatile anger, right? And his friends were telling him that they thought he needed to get a dog. And he got irritated even at that. He didn't want to get a dog. It's stupid. Get a dog. But that one of his buddies takes him to the shelter. just to see. He's like, let's just go play with the dogs for a minute. And he comes home with Cheyenne, a pit bull mix rescue. And all of a sudden, like, the sky started brightening up a little bit. It got him out of the house. It got him talking to people again. It gave him someone to communicate with that didn't judge him, who would understand. And sadly, like with some people that have PTS, there came a point where it got to be so overwhelming that he almost committed suicide. And he said that that night, in his darkest moment, he looked down and Cheyenne was looking right up at him. And he said, he realized that he's like, what's wrong, Daddy? And he decided not to commit suicide that night. And now he's a father of 2. He started Companions for Heroes in order to help others. And so they match up rescue dogs with wounded warriors, and they get everything settled. So, 3 months worth of food, health and vaccine checks, and some training if it's needed. And I've seen the power of a dog to comfort someone when they're lonely. Like my grandmother, when my grandfather passed away, she was so lonely, and they got her a little dachshund dog, and he didn't like to walk very much, which was okay with her. He would sit on the couch all night long with her, and that became her companion. I also have a theory that every kid needs a dog and every dog needs a kid, because it does teach you an amazing amount of responsibility, but also compassion, and you grow up with that first love, and I think it makes you a better human later on.
I totally agree. I mean, you don't need to convince me. Everybody knows that this election season was pretty rough. I live in Los Angeles, and it was really rough for me. Surprised to be here.
What was it, 46%, 49%?
Pretty bad. And I would come home after, being with friends and dealing with the election or doing Fox and taking the incoming hits. And
checking your social media.
And checking social media and taking more hits.
Right.
And my dog was just a great stabilizer. Sometimes I would just take another walk, an extra walk, just to get out and watch a dog deal with the world. And all of my problems would just fall away because of my love for that dog. How do you think dogs would have affected this election because I don't think, I think Hillary does have a dog, but we never heard about it until
They didn't exploit it like I do.
But I don't think the Trumps have a dog, do they?
I asked that at one point, and someone said they might, but I don't think they do. But maybe they will now.
During this election, we absolutely didn't hear about dogs. I know we saw that picture from Hillary after she lost, that she was walking a dog, and I thought, she has a dog?
Remember they got Buddy after the strife at the White House?
Oh,
Remember that?
Right. But my point is that dogs are such an amazing, they make you human, that politicians should have dogs.
Yeah, Laura Bush would say that the reason that they had Barney and Miss Beasley, then they get Miss Beasley, and then they had Dewey, the cat, named after the Dewey Decimal System. I think that was her name. And there was a cat named India, or something, Indy. Yes, certainly what she would say is that pets made the White House a home. And I had a chance one time to meet the Obama's dogs. Just by chance, I went to the portrait unveiling for 43, and as I was leaving, the guy that took care of the dogs was bringing them in, and they are magnificent animals. They are absolutely gorgeous dogs. Barney, he was a character. He used to come around the West Wing, and you don't want to put your hand out to pet him. He loved 43, and that was about it.
Well, I think we want to take some questions from the audience.
On anything. We'll talk dogs, politics.
Yeah, maybe dogs.
Rick's possible appointment to UN ambassador. You really should, if you really take a look at him now. You might be moving to New York. And Rick worked at the United Nations when I was White House press secretary. He was a spokesman up there, and he is a force for good and peace in the world. He understands the issues, and he knows the people in the building, and I do hope that the Trump transition team makes a really good decision and chooses you, if I can be so bold to say that.
You just want Lola near Jasper, I think.
Yes, I would take Lola to the park at 7:30 in the morning.
We are going to take a couple of questions, and our first one is just to your right in the middle section here.
Hi, thanks for coming out here. I'm a huge dog lover. I have a 6-year-old yellow lab, and that's kind of what drew me to you and this book. And I'm every day rushing to walk him and be with him. And I was wondering, with such a successful career and so many people, especially women, struggle with work-life balance, how do you do it? How do you have such a successful career but make time for your husband and loving your dog and being there for him?
Well, thank you for the question, and I really should give Peter some more credit here. Without Peter, I would never have been able to have Henry or Jasper. And Peter works from home. He does the walk. I try to go at least twice a week, but he does the walk every day with Jasper. He was the one who took care of Henry every day, especially in those last 6 months where he needed some more care. In fact, I knew that he had this route that he would do with Henry. It wasn't too far, but there was a guy with an ice cream truck. His name was Eddie from the Bronx. And every time he saw Henry, because at that point we knew that he had a terminal illness and he loved ice cream, it was like, "Hey, Henry, you want your cone?" Yes, we would have a cone. The other thing that I would say is one of my favorite pieces of advice from my first book was that choosing to be loved is not a career-limiting decision. I got married relatively young for my peer group at 26. I couldn't have done any of this stuff, I don't think, without Peter's support, especially in the busy years in the White House, the election years of 2012 and 2016. Somebody who understands when I'm leaving at 7 in the morning and he says, "When will you be home?" I'm like, "I think after 1 a.m. He's like, "Okay." And I don't have to worry about anything. So there was very collaborative in nature. But the other thing that I truly believe is that having dogs has helped strengthen my marriage. Because people can be tense, they can have sharp words with each other, but when your dog is there, and maybe you have to go for a walk together or something, it's just been incredibly helpful, I think, for the two of us who have pretty busy careers and pretty stressful situations at times, to know that the goofy Jasper sitting in between us on the couch really brought us together. So I couldn't have done it alone.
Rick, Dana, to your right, two youngsters from Fontana, 11-year-old
Montana?
and 15-year-old. What are your names? Ireland and Berlin.
Oh.
What is your question?
The next presidential election, I'm going to be old enough to vote. Do you have any tips for a young voter?
And do you have a question too, young lady?
Is the dog park the only place where you don't talk politics?
Oh, can I take you home? I'm going to answer that question first. You know what's funny? This is going to sound bad, but in my social life, if I have a choice of who I'm going to see or dinners and things, I only go out with people I agree with. You do that?
I live in LA. That wouldn't work.
I can go, if I go out with people I don't agree with on politics, then we just don't talk about it because we want to enjoy our time together. But I do also love politics and I love government. So for your question about what to look for, there's some great resources at your disposal right now because of the Al Gore's internet. But, so you live in Montana?
Fontana.
Oh, Fontana. I thought you said Montana. Fontana's here in California.
Yeah.
Got it. Can I make a recommendation? Join the speech and debate team. It absolutely is the one thing I could point to that made all the difference in my career. I worked on extemporaneous speaking, which basically meant that I had to be cognizant of all current affairs, and I had to be prepared to argue persuasively on either side of the issue. And I really think that helped give me a great foundation. And then even if you choose not to do anything in political life, having that ability to argue persuasively in front of people or maybe higher ups in your future, like when you go for a promotion, you will always be glad if you were a part of the speech and debate team. Plus, they're really fun people. So that would be my recommendation. But do you have a better one?
No, I think that's pretty good.
Okay.
I'd say
I left
vote
him
Republican,
speechless.
but I better not say that.
Off to your left, front row.
Hi, this is Nader from Yorba Linda. Well, we all know with the election of Trump, it was quite a long shot, right? With all the contenders he had in the primary going up against the Queen, right? Queen Clinton, and actually winning. So quite a long shot. With that thought in mind, what do you think the chances are that Jasper will replace Greg Gutfeld on the 5?
The funny thing about Gutfeld is that he pretends not to like Jasper. But then when he comes over, he likes to have him sit on his lap. Yes, in the back? Or is that where we're going?
Yeah, we're going right back here.
But Chris is running. Here he is. He's rounding the bases. And going to make a touchdown? No, that's not right. I'm kidding.
Hi there. I am a professional in the pet industry for the last 25 years. So what you're saying really hits home with me about having every kid having a dog. I've had 3 kids who've had 3 dogs for most of their growing up. I was wondering if you're familiar with the Habry studies that the pet industry has done, which talks about the Human-Animal Bond Research Initiative. It is incredible wealth of information that's been put together with the pet industry and Purdue University. So for any people saying we shouldn't have dogs, shouldn't have animals, I encourage you to look at that and anyone else because it's just incredible.
I think I am familiar with that because I read a study not too long ago where, and this is not good, honestly, this was an actual scientific study, that you should look your dog in the eye and tell them that you love them, and that it gives you like a shot of dopamine. Like it's basically like there's a physical reaction in you and in the dog that both makes you know that you have that shared love. So that eye contact is so important. And that's not creepy stuff.
No, I don't find that creepy at all.
It's totally true.
Yeah.
And why not? Try it.
I tried. I do it all
And
the time.
Purdue University, what a great place, run by Governor Mitch Daniels now. Amazing.
Next question from the center section.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Brian from Upland, and I wanted to ask you, first of all, I think you're the classiest person on the 5. And second, I wanted to say is when Greg Gutfeld makes those wild comments and jokes, does he make those ahead of time, or are they just kind of like off the top of his head right then and there?
I think it's a mix. There are some things that you can prepare for on the 5. Like, basically, if you're going to be talking about Anthony Weiner, you basically just turn the floor over to Greg. He's got it all. I think some of his funniest comments are the ones where he shocks himself, where he's like, I can't believe I just said that. One of the great things about the 5, too, is, I think that makes it such a good show and why it's had this long life is because it's totally unscripted. Aside from Greg's monologue, we basically just think things through on our own. We don't talk about it beforehand. And then, in fact, I've been taking down less and less notes with me. When I first started the White House press secretary, I would take an entire binder full of notes so that it was basically like a security blanket. And there was one day that I didn't have time to take that, and I just had one piece of paper, and I jotted down a couple of things, and then I realized I was liberated from that anchor that I knew all of the material. I didn't ever actually even open the binder. I just was using it as a crutch. So now on the 5, I realized that especially because of the election, I was reading so much news, and there was actually a lot of the same topics every day, that I took fewer notes, and then I think our performances are actually better because of that. Yes.
Next question.
Hi, Jennifer from Yorba Linda, and I just adopted a puppy on Saturday.
Congratulations.
Yes.
You and George W. Bush, he did the same. He adopted a puppy named Freddie this weekend.
Oh.
What is the puppy's name?
Annie.
Annie.
That's what I'm like shocked. But also, I wanted to ask you, you've been a former press secretary, what qualifications do you think that Trump should be looking at for his press secretary right now? What are the most important?
Good question. And if I can push that a little bit, and can you tell us who you think would be best?
Well, I would never get in front of that train. I'll let them.
Oh, come on, let's make a little news here, Dana.
I did. You're going to be the next UN ambassador. I feel like a press secretary, partly it's, of course you want somebody who can communicate well. They have plenty of those people that are good on television or that can communicate. I think one of the most important things is total trust. Not only trust in that, like Trump needs to trust that person and vice versa, but the new president needs to trust that that person is going to need to talk to the press. They are not going away. And we need them in our country. So there needs to be some trust that you're going to speak on my behalf and you're not always going to have to check in. The press secretary also must have access to the president. So it's not good enough just to say, here, this is what I want you to say today. It's absolutely not good enough. The press secretary needs to be there in as many meetings as possible, not all day long, but enough of them, especially decision-making meetings when they're going to make decisions about immigration or tax reform or whatever else is coming down the pike. Because as a press secretary, you don't just need to know what the end product is. You need to see how that decision-making is made so that you can explain to the press how they got there, because no one in America is going to agree with every decision. But you should be able to respect the decision-making process. I think that is really important, and so that access is critical. The other thing is that tactically the job has changed quite a bit. You know, when I left in January of 2009, I didn't even have a Twitter account. Like, tactically, communication has changed so much that you have to have somebody who is adept at that. And then the final thing I would say is, it's great to have somebody who can do a cable news interview, but you really need somebody who cares about the policy and can dig in, right, and learn all of those details, because your press secretary is only as good as the policy that they understand. And for me, when I first started as a spokesperson, I worked for the chairman of the Energy and Power Subcommittee. I didn't know the difference between a megawatt and a megaphone. Literally, I was 23 years old, and I was so fortunate because there were all of these people in my life, the chief of staff, the legislative director, the committee staff director, who would walk me through everything so that I would understand the policy. And then I could get my words and my ability to get the issue narrowed down to something translatable to the American people. But it takes a little bit of time to do that. So it's interesting. Ari Fleischer and I have a ongoing debate about what's harder, to be the press secretary at the beginning of an administration or the end. Because in the beginning, you don't have the policies yet. And at the end, you have to defend all of them. So that's what I'd say.
Let me ask one quick question here. Was there ever a time that there was crucial information or crucial questions coming from the press? You didn't have the answer, but it was something that you couldn't just spin, that you needed to get to the president or the chief of staff immediately. And was there ever a time when you couldn't get to them, and what did you do?
I had to wait. I had pretty good access, I have to say. And the president had a requirement in the West Wing and with the cabinet that if Dana has called you, if you've left your desk and Dana has called you when you get back, there's a message from her, she's the first person you call back. So I had the ability to get what I needed pretty quickly. I will say there is something that I do regret, and Rick, since you worked in national security issues, I think you'll agree with me. And I've been giving some thought to this because in 2005, the New York Times revealed the enhanced interrogation techniques, the waterboarding that was used against, what was his name? It was two, right, that's what I mean. But what was the guy's name, the library tower guy? Musawi? Sheikh Mohammed. I could have guessed that. It's like John Smith. No. I can't remember who it was. I can see his mugshot, though. He didn't look like a very happy camper.
But we should note that it was only 2 people.
No, that was my point, is that when the New York Times reveals this program, the program was so secret that I think maybe, 30 people knew about it, including Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid, who then denied it. But anyway, I didn't know about it. I was deputy press secretary. I go through 4 years, and now I'm the press secretary. We have been dealing with these narratives that George W. Bush is a war criminal, and torture becomes a major subject of the campaign in 2008. I go for my exit interview in January 2009. That's like if you have a top secret clearance, you sign on the dotted line when you get it, and you sign on the dotted line when you leave, saying that you'll keep the information private. It is in that meeting that I find out that it was only 2 guys. And if I had known that, I could have sold that deal. Right? Like you can explain that extreme measures were needed for imminent information about a terrorist attack if it were 2 guys. But nobody told me that. And I was so mad that day thinking, are you kidding me? We went for 4 years with this narrative, and I could have done something if I had known. That kind of bothers me. So if the next press secretary takes anything away from my experience, I would say that's the one thing there's a lot of tension there, that the intel community wants to keep things secret for a good reason. They really do have good reason. But the lawyers also want to keep press people from commenting on things because there might be a lawsuit, etc. And the press secretary has to be able to navigate all of those things. And the best way to do that is to know the policy.
I will say President-elect Trump was so right, and it rang so true to me when he would say, I'm not going to tell you our plans. The dialing back of information to the public, especially when it comes to intel, is so needed. And I know you and I have spoke about this over the last 8 years. This administration has announced everything, and we get every detail when they rescue someone, and with the sources and methods that they have revealed has been very troubling. So I think dialing it back is a very good thing, even though it will frustrate the press and they will complain. There's no question about that.
Yeah, I think that's true.
We have time for one last question. We want to give you all the chance to meet Dana in our front lobby and get your book signed. So we'll take one last question, and then we'll move into that signing. Our last question.
Okay, no pressure. Last question.
Okay, thank you for being here. So I work at UCLA, and I've noticed there's been a big transition to this PC culture, and it almost seems like people are looking to be offended some way by what you say. So I was wondering, in your mind, how has our society shifted from, I'd say, maybe 50 years ago, where this wasn't a problem, to where we are today? Is it a problem? And if you believe it is a problem, how we can solve this in the future?
It's such an offensive question.
Yeah, saying you're offended basically means you can end the conversation, right? Yeah, obviously it's a problem. It's silly. The safe spaces thing. You think that when Britt Hume was doing the 7 p.m. show the last 8 weeks, he's done the Campus Crazy segment. You could actually do one every night. There's some pretty bizarre behavior going on. I don't know how you fix it, actually. I am sensitive about words that I use with other people so that I don't offend. And I can find myself sometimes getting tongue-tied, like, can I say that? Wait, are you allowed? And I think that's empathy, and it's wanting to be kind. But at some point, you realize that, especially on campuses where you're supposed to enjoy 4 years of open debate, it has gotten a little crazy town. What do you think?
No, I totally agree.
Maybe everybody should just get a dog.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, Jasper's mom.
Thank you so much.